afternoon. We've got some sickness, and we've got a couple of folks traveling. So our numbers are down a little bit, but we're thankful that you made the effort to come out this afternoon and be with us. Hopefully things that we talk about will be beneficial. I read an article this past week, and I want to share just a couple things from that article with you, because that's where I got in mind the lesson that I have to talk about. The article was about PETA, which is, as you know, the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals. If you haven't ever heard of PETA. Apparently there's a show in Britain, which is much like our Good Morning America. It's called Good Morning Britain. And on this show there were some spokespeople for PETA. And this is what they had to say. They said that we need to stop calling animals that we own pets, because that is patronizing to them and it's degrading, and we ought to refer to them as companions instead of pets. It's offensive to call an animal a pet. They said a lot of people at home who have dogs or cats will call them pets and refer to themselves as owners, and this implies that animals are a possession, like a car, for example. Okay, so I don't need to read anymore. You get the gist of what they're talking about. It's offensive to call animals pets now, per these spokespeople for PETA. And so what I want to spend a few minutes talking about this evening is offense. We live in a world, a society that has a chip on its shoulder. People are looking for reasons to complain and complain. You say the wrong word and you may end up finding your job in jeopardy. Maybe close friends will split. Maybe even long-standing members of the church will get upset, leave in a huff because they're offended. People are just so quick to get offended today. And so I want to spend a few minutes talking about offense. What does the Bible say about offense? And hopefully we can make some applications in our life about that. I just thought that article was interesting. You can't call animals pets anymore. That's offensive. Okay. Let's talk about offense. You know, the first thing I think we need to say is that Christians are not to give offense. I mean, our goal is not to go and offend people. We shouldn't just be out here, I'm going to see how many people I can offend today. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 10, verses 32 and 33, he said, "Give none offense, neither to the Jews, nor to the Gentiles, nor to the church of God, even as I please all men in all things, not seeking mine own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved." So, Paul said, don't try to offend the Jews, the Greeks, or Christians in general, because our goal is to try to encourage people. Our goal is to try to get people to go to heaven. And so, if we're out here offending people, then that's going to hurt our cause. And so, that's what Paul talked about there. But I think we need to stop for a minute and say today that people have lost the sight of the meaning of offense. You know, today, anything that I don't like or I feel demeans my position in any way, that's offensive. People have called as offensive things even in the church. You know, I mean, if a person tries to serve the Lord's Supper without a tie, people say that's offensive. If there's anything I don't like, that offends me. And that's not what the biblical meaning of offense is. The word offense is a translation of the Greek word. I'm not even going to try to say it. But it means a trap or a snare. If you offend somebody, that is to put a trap or a snare in front of them. Notice what it said in Proverbs 7:23. On my text copy. Let's skip to Psalm 106, verse 36. It says, "And they served their idols, which were a snare unto them." So idols were a snare. It was an offense to people because it trapped them. The idols were a snare. In Psalm 69, verse 22, it says, "Let their table become a snare before them, and that which should have been for their welfare, let it become a trap." So again, this is the biblical definition of offense. Things that offend people are a snare, they're a trap. And so that's what the Bible has to say about that. Paul wrote to Timothy in 1 Timothy 6 and verse 9, he says, but they, if I can say it, they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. Paul wrote to Timothy and said, people that are going to be rich, that could be a snare to them. That could be an offense to them. It could cause them to be trapped in that situation, and it could cause them to fall. It could cause them to lose their sight off the goal of following Christ. And so that is what the Bible considers an offense. Not just anything that I don't like, or that I feel is demeaning toward me. No, it's something that could cause me to stumble or to fall. Now, our point is that Christians ought not to be giving offense. Paul wrote in Romans 14, verses 20 and 21, said, "For meat destroy not the work of God. All things indeed are pure, But it is evil for that man who eateth with offense. It is good neither to eat flesh, nor to drink wine, nor anything whereby thy brother stumbleth, or is offended, or is made weak. And so as Christians, it's our duty to lead people to Christ, not to drive them away into sin. And so what Paul said here is that there's going to be wicked people that are going to cause others to stumble. So we've got to be focused on our goal and not give offense. Paul also wrote in 2 Corinthians 6 and verse 3, said, giving no offense in anything, that the ministry might not be blamed. So we've got to work at that. Give no offense so the ministry can't be discredited, can't be blamed. I don't need to give offense so that people could then talk badly about the church. I don't want to put a negative light on that. So I have to work hard to not offend folks, not to cause folks to stumble. Proverbs 18 verse 19 says, a brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and their contentions are like the bars of a castle. If you offend a brother, then it's going to be difficult in order to win him. The proverb writer said, more difficult than a strong city, and their contentions like the bars of a castle. Once you offend somebody and you cause them to stumble, it's going to be tough in order to get them back to want to listen to you, back to want to hear what's right and good. And so the first point we want to make is that Christians are not to give offense. That's not our goal. We should not be out trying to see how many people we can offend, and we should not be either. We're going to talk more about it, but we shouldn't be looking for things that are offensive either. You know, the second thing I think we should say is that even when we try to live peaceably, we try to do our best, we are going to offend people. So get the difference between our first and second point. Our goal is not to offend people, but even when I try to live right, when I try to live peaceably, I'm going to offend people. People will be offended. In Luke 17, verses 1 and 2, then said he to the disciples, of course Jesus, said, is it impossible, but that offenses will come? But woe unto him through whom they come. It were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and he cast into the sea than that he should offend one of these little ones. So Jesus said, and we talked about this verse last Sunday morning, Matthew's account of it. But Jesus said, if you're going to cause somebody to stumble, you were better off to have a millstone hung about your neck and cast into the depth of the sea. But unfortunately, we do sin from time to time. Unfortunately, we may do that. And so if I sin, I could offend somebody that way. If I sin, I could cause somebody else to stumble. And so that's why it's important to try not to do that, to try to avoid sin. Now, that's our goal. But we do sin at times, and our sin will drive others away. And so we've got to work to not do that. We won't want to cause somebody to stumble, but if we sin, we could do that. We may offend somebody that way. You know, a second way I was thinking that we might offend people is looking at the example of Paul. Now, Paul in Titus 1 here, verses 12 and 13, has some strong words about the Cretians. Notice what he says. He says, one of themselves, even a prophet of their own, said, the Cretians are always liars, evil beasts, slow bellies. This witness is true, wherefore rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith. Now get what Paul's saying there. Those are pretty strong words. If a preacher said that about your home state, would you be offended? Would you get up and leave? And if I said, oh, you people from Tennessee, you are this way, would you be offended at that? I'm afraid that that would offend a lot of people today. But when Paul made his comment about the Cretians, it wasn't to drive them away. He wasn't trying to offend them and get them to leave. Paul is acknowledging what they already knew. Notice, he said, one of your own prophets have said, the Cretians are always liars, evil beasts, slow bellies. He's just confirming what they already know about themselves. This is a fact. They lived in a wicked society, and their habits were influencing them. And so Paul's statement was sort of insulting, but he was pinpointing the cause of sin and the means of addressing it. He was pinpointing the wrong that was going on, and he was saying that, well, Titus, they need to be rebuked sharply so that they may be sound in faith. And so sometimes when we rebuke people sharply, we're going to offend people. People may be offended at that. That's not our intention. Our intention isn't to run people off. But sometimes when we try to rebuke people and tell them the truth, they're going to be offended and they're going to be upset. And actually, if we don't do a good job of rebuking them, we probably didn't upset them. If we didn't upset them, we probably didn't do a good job of rebuking them. And so, again, our goal is to not give offense. Our goal is to try to live peaceably, but there are times where we're going to have to take a stand for things. We talked this morning about not being neutral, about taking a stand. There's going to be times when we take a stand for something that is going to put somebody else at odds with us, and they may be offended. If that's the case, then so be it. But our goal is to live peaceably. But we will offend people. The third thing I think we need to say is that Jesus was a perfect man. Jesus was perfect. He never sinned, and yet he offended many people. Jesus offended many people. Righteousness sometimes will drive people away. If people aren't willing to accept the truth, sometimes righteousness will drive them away. As we said, Jesus was perfect, and he caused offense. Notice that Paul said in Romans 9 and verse 33, talking about Jesus, he says, as it is written, behold, I lay in Zion a stumbling block and a rock of offense, and whosoever believeth on him shall not be ashamed. Jesus is going to be a rock of offense. He's going to be a stumbling stone. That's what Jesus was called. In 1 Peter 2 and verse 8, again it says, a stone of stumbling, a rock of offense, even to them which stumble at the word, being disobedient, whereunto also they were appointed. Jesus didn't do anything wrong. He never sinned, but he caused people to choose between doing right and doing wrong. And some people chose to do wrong. And people still today are making that choice. But when people won't obey the truth, they are offended at the truth because they don't love it. They don't want to do it. They don't want to pursue it. And so in that way, Jesus is a rock of offense. He's causing people to choose to do right or to do wrong. John's disciples, in Matthew 11, we'll read just a minute. John's disciples wanted to know if Jesus was the Messiah. In Matthew 11, verse 2 beginning, it says, now when John had heard in the prison the works of Christ, he sent two of his disciples and said unto him, art thou he that should come, or do we look for another? Jesus answered and said unto them, go and show John again those things which ye do hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. Notice what Jesus said. And blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me. Jesus said the person that will not be offended in me is going to be blessed, because that means they're going to accept the truth. But sometimes the truth hurts. When I'm on the opposite side of that and I'm doing wrong, and the truth is presented to me, well, that kind of hurts a little bit, because that means I'm going to have to make some changes. I'm doing wrong. I'm going to have to change to get right. And Jesus said, blessed is the person, though, that is not offended in him. When truth is pointed out, when error is pointed out, the person that accepts truth will not be offended. And Jesus said, blessed is that person. So, when John's disciples wanted to know if he was the Messiah, he said, basically, I'm the Messiah. You go tell them all the things you've seen. But for our lesson tonight, the point we're making is that he also said, blessed is the person that is not going to be offended in me. Now, Jesus said that, but our whole point here is that Jesus did offend people. Notice Matthew 13, starting in verse 54. It says, and when he was coming to his own country, he taught them in their synagogue, insomuch that they were astonished, and said, whence hath this man this wisdom and these mighty works? Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brethren James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And his sisters, are they not all with us? Whence then hath this man all these things? Notice it says, and they were offended in him. But Jesus said unto them, a prophet is not without honor, save in his own country and in his own house. So many Jews stumbled over the things that Jesus did. And they tried to make, excuses. We can't be that special. We know his whole family. We know his brethren. We know his sisters. We know his parents. I mean, why does he think he's so special? And it says, and they were offended in him. He put a stumbling block before them because he was standing up for truth and right, and he was telling them what his mission was. And they just thought, there's no way that can be so. And they were offended. And they didn't want to accept what he had to say because they had these preconceived ideas, this prejudice against him. He's from right here. He can't be anything special. And so many people did stumble. Many people were offended because of Christ. Notice in Matthew 15, verses 10 through 12, it says, and he called the multitude and said unto them, hear and understand, not that which goeth into the mouth defileth a man, but that which cometh out of the mouth, this defileth a man. Then came his disciples and said unto him, knowest thou that the Pharisees were offended after they heard this saying? So you get what's going on there. Jesus is teaching a truth, and the disciples sort of come to him. I just picture that they sort of come to him and pull him aside. Do you not realize you're offending people? The disciples had to tell him, you're offended, folks. The Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying. I didn't put the next verse on the board, but Matthew 15, verse 13, remember what Jesus said? His response was simply, after being asked, do you know you're offending these people? He basically told them, any plant that my Heavenly Father hath not planted is going to be rooted up. That was his answer. I'm telling the truth. And so if they're offended by the truth, then they're not going to make it in the long run. If they're not going to listen to the Word of God, then they're not going to be in a good standing in the long run. They were offended by what Jesus said. And so, in other words, we can do good, we can do bad, and really, no matter what we do, somebody's going to find a reason to be offended. People will seek out reasons to depart from God. People will seek out reasons to be offended. Some are offended by what they view as an insult. I want to look at one more passage in Matthew 15. This is a discourse that Jesus had with a woman, and I just want us to notice how this sort of played out. Hopefully the text may be small. But in Matthew 15 and verse 21, it says, Then Jesus went thence and departed into the coast of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast, and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with the devil. But he answered her not a word. And his disciples came and besought him, saying, Send her away, for she crieth after us. But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then came she and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he answered and said, It is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs. And she said, Truth, Lord, yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. Then Jesus answered and said unto her, O woman, great is thy faith, be it unto thee even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. Okay, let's try to break down what happened here. Notice at the beginning, Jesus ignored the woman. She came to him and said, My daughter is grievously vexed with the devil, but he answered her not a word. He basically ignored her. Well, that would offend some. The disciples, in her presence, wanted to send her away repeatedly. Notice, the disciples came to exhort him, saying, Send her away, she cried after us. She is getting on our nerves, please tell her to leave. That would be offensive to some. Then Jesus said, basically, she was of the wrong nationality. Notice there that she came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. He answered and said, It is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs. Well, that would be very offensive to some today. But did Jesus offend this woman? No, he did not. He did not. Because it did not drive her away. It did not cause her to stumble. And so the question may be asked then, why did Jesus insult this woman? Why was he rude to her? It seems like he was just so rude to her. Why did he insult her that way? And I think the answer is it was a test of her faith. He wanted to see how strong her faith was. And so after she passed the test, after she didn't let those things run her away, she wasn't offended, he answered to her and said, O woman, great is thy faith. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. She proved her faith by not being offended at the things Jesus had to say. She didn't live by her emotions. It wasn't just an emotional thing. Can you believe he said that to me? He's ignored me. And then they're asking me to leave. People today would be offended halfway through this story. But she didn't live by her emotions. Faith isn't just an emotional thing. This woman's faith was unshakable. And so Jesus told her, great is thy faith. So offense. Offense. You know, we live in a society, as we started out saying, that's looking for any excuse to claim offense. Just anything you do that I don't like, I can say, well, it offends me. And what we've been talking about is, as Christians, we should try our hardest to minimize being offensive. That's not what our goal is. Our goal isn't to go out and offend people. But we've got to know that we will fail to completely not offend everybody. We're going to offend people. So, we can either be so afraid of driving someone off that we'll never correct an error. If there's something wrong, we won't ever correct it because we're afraid to drive somebody off. We can't live that way either. We can't leave a brother or sister in sin as to avoid offending them. Sometimes we have to rebuke them sharply. And that's what Paul wrote there to Titus. But nothing should stand between us and serving God. Sometimes our feelings are going to get hurt. Sometimes your feelings are going to get hurt. Sometimes my feelings get hurt. If I'm doing something wrong and then the truth is presented to me, that hurts a little bit. But it shouldn't offend me. It should cause me to want to turn around and do right. And so we need to be like that Canaanite woman that wouldn't allow herself to be offended. She heard what Jesus had to say. She believed it as being true, and he said she had great faith because of that. Are you offended by the truth? Well, we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be, right? But sometimes it is offensive. There's going to be times that maybe a brother or sister rebukes you. We shouldn't let that offend us. We shouldn't let that cause us to stumble. Actually, it takes a lot of love and a lot of compassion, but a lot of courage in order to rebuke somebody. And it may hurt your feelings, but it wouldn't be much of a rebuke if it didn't. So, offense. We shouldn't look to give offense, nor should we look to find offense. Hopefully the lesson's been beneficial to you this afternoon. Again, I can't, that article is, I would laugh if it wasn't so sad, but we can't call animals pets anymore. That's offensive to them. So we live in a world that's easily offended. People look to be offended. But the truth shouldn't be offensive. The truth is actually what's going to lead us to heaven. That's the goal, right? And so if the truth is taught and it offends you, if it offends me, then that means I'm in the wrong. The truth is the truth. It's right. It's always right. If I'm offended, that means there's something wrong with my heart. There's something wrong with my condition. So we don't need to be offended. And when we try to teach the truth, please know that we're doing it out of love. And that's our goal, to do the right thing. Are you a Christian tonight? If you're not, you need to make that important decision. If you want to study more about that, just say a word. We'd be glad to study for you, to study with you, and help you out in any way we can. If you need to be baptized into Christ, we'll be willing to do that tonight. Have you been living the way you ought to have been living? If you feel like you haven't, we also have a good opportunity to make things right. If you need the prayers of the church, we ask that you come forward, whatever your need, while we stand and while we sing this song.